So, last but not least, we've got two awesome people, Idan and Maddy. Thank you so much for being on stage. We're so excited to have you. And I think it's a great topic to end on, which is how does NFTs bridge the VC financing? And I think a lot of time has been spent and questions in the audience around how do you get VC funding where there's no clear metrics utility as of yet, when you have to back the team to begin with. And I think NFTs are an awesome kind of intermediary, but also a parallel work stream for funding. So take it away, and thank you very much for, very much not last but not least. So thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe, Maddy, you want to speak a bit about your background before we begin?
Yeah, of course. So I started with a fitness business, very random. Managed to scale a fitness business quite far. Really, really enjoyed that process. Realized that I loved startups. I then joined a fintech startup for a little bit. Again, really, really cool experience before going into venture capital. And I think that's where my passion for getting more funding to women and also seeing more representation in terms of female investors started. And got into Web3, very passionate about trying to diversify Web3, trying to diversify the funding. So I started a project called Angel Alliance, and we started as an NFT collection. We're now pivoting into something a little bit different. We are training Web3 VC analysts, and we're building up an angel syndicate alongside that with a huge focus on diversity. But I would also love to hear a bit more about you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Idan. I'm from Israel, Tel Aviv. I work for a VC called Collider Ventures. We are basically the only VC for crypto and Web3 in Israel. So we've been investing for the last few years in crypto projects, doing mostly like seed, early stage investments. My background is very financial. I did private equity and venture capital in Israel. I had a side hobby called crypto, and 2 years ago I went full time into it. And today, like, what I'm doing most of my days is meeting startups, meeting entrepreneurs, thinking about crypto, writing about crypto, living crypto, like many of you. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And I guess for anyone that doesn't know, I think it's less than 5% of crypto Web3 startups are actually run by women. I don't know if that's something that you have experienced in your now Web3 VC role.
Yeah, we actually did a lot of work in Israel. We actually have a plan just for women right now to educate about Web3. So, like, we think the problem is there's not enough people in Web3 at all, like men and women. So we try to push a lot of both into. But yeah, I think it's a general problem for startups in general, not just crypto. But yeah, for sure, it's one of those things we have to push and continue pushing, every day.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I used to work for a deep tech VC, and obviously there are going to be less female founders at a deep tech VC, but I could probably count the number of women that I interviewed on 2 hands, which is not a good sign. And I think it's a very complex problem to break down in terms of why, is it 2.3% of VC funding goes to women? And again, it's a very, very complex problem to break down. And then when you look at Web3 in general as well, when you look at the percentage of 5% of crypto companies owned by women combined with the 2.3%, I don't even want to know how low that figure is. In your experience, is there anything, I guess, that you could pinpoint as to why there is this huge gap at the moment?
Well, I think, it starts with education. So a lot of the, like, computer science, a lot of the basic things you study in university are, you have more men and that are going towards that path. And I think that's the first reason, university, you have to start from the beginning. So it's a lot of education, science education, things that, mostly things that men pursue today. And so I think we should start like from, when we're like in the age that we'll learn the most basic stuff, like 12, 13, 15. And that's the age to push more women into like de- developing a career in science professions, and I think then you're going to see downstream that like you have more women in crypto and in tech in general. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think there's also another issue where women tend to start, so women are starting businesses, but they're starting smaller businesses, which means that they don't scale as much, which means that they don't necessarily need VC funding.
Yeah.
And I think, again, there's lack of role models is one, lack of funding is another huge one. Lack of interest, I think, is another one that doesn't get touched on as much. And again, I think that links back to when you're almost framed at a young age, subconsciously, in terms of what you want to go into sometimes. So that's why there are less women in STEM. You don't see many women in STEM. I mean, it's getting better, not good enough yet. But I think there's also this lack of interest as well when I speak to my friends about building a business, my female friends. It's just, there's just almost this disconnect that we're trying to break down as well.
Yeah. And maybe we can jump to trying to combine that with NFT funding. So, but maybe we'll take a step back, like just generally speak about NFT funding, because I think like one of the interesting things that have been happening for the past year is like we have a new avenue to finance activities in Web3, right? We can sell NFTs and we can finance these activities which were harder to finance before. So like where does it find you? What do you think about the things that you can finance with NFTs that were not possible before?
Yeah, so with Angel Alliance, we actually funded 11 female founders, which was really cool. So I think what Web3 is doing is it's giving opportunities to different funding systems. So now you could just launch an NFT collection and you could raise, I think people are like over $1 million or whatever it is. And you can make that in probably a few minutes. Maybe not in this current market, but again, in a normal situation. And when you're looking at things like token sales, that's another way. And I think what's, again, really interesting is, and I haven't really quite got my head around this, so when you're doing a community-driven raise, how do you think that changes the traditional raise? So say, for example, traditional VC, you obviously have, they get a seat on the board or whatever it is. How do you think that changes with these new funding systems? So say if I launch an NFT collection.
Yeah, I think that, you know, when people use NFTs to finance their whatever they're doing, so, you know, basically if I'm taking a step back, so if you go back to 2017 or 18, so people used to sell tokens and you had these public sales, right? You had this project that, you know, sold tokens to retail, and that's how they finance their activities. And if you look on the last 2 or 3 years, so you can see that like that is mostly gone. So the public sale of tokens was replaced by like professional venture capital that are doing the financing. And then you had all sorts of like unique projects that still wanted to get financed, but like VCs, you know, don't really understand them. The business model seems, you know, a lot of those things are unique creatures like Constitution DAO, City DAO, a lot of the DAOs that we've seen last year. And I think that's the case where you need a different route to raise money. So the things, you know, VCs are very finance oriented, right? You look for business models, you look for metrics, you look for very specific things. And when people want to build these really unique things in Web3, you don't always have them. And I think when you want to raise funds toward this kind of goals, like things that are unstructured, wild creativity, in all sorts of areas, so that's the place I think NFTs really shine. And if you look on fungible tokens, so you know the best path today for a project is kind of, if you're a strong project, you will go to venture capital, you will raise money, you will give them tokens. And if you want to get your token distributed for retail, then you're going to airdrop it. That's what most funds prefer. They prefer, you know, people, you know, projects raising like traditionally, and you get the distribution by airdrop. And NFTs give you this, you know, this new approach for doing that. in projects that are not 100%, fit for even crypto VCs, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I want to link this back to how this could potentially change the funding gap. Because the traditional system clearly is not doing very well. I know that in the UK, I think it's now 1% of VC funding goes to women. And I think there's a lot of change that needs to happen. And I think what doing something like launching an NFT collection does is it gives accessibility and another option. And I think another option for women in particular as well, even though we still need to get more women into Web3, NFTs, crypto in general, but I think it gives that other option.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing about NFTs is you kind of have this direct way to approach your audience, right? And it's easier to find your tribe. And you have this theory about like 1,000 true fans. I don't know if you know it. Like the internet helps you find your 1,000 true fans. And I think with NFTs, the idea is it's easier to get finance through that. And then, I think if you're talking about women that are having tough time raising money, so I think for them it's an instrument which is like more can help them be more directly engaged with the communities, and then you can kind of think that this mechanism is a good way to get around biases, for example. So that's one of the things that I think you can solve with NFTs. You basically can fund a lot of stuff that didn't get funding before. It was harder, and like this crazy idea. I don't know. There's all sorts of cool stuff going on. I don't know if you guys know like decentralized science. I don't know if you know about that, but it's like a super cool new approach to fund scientific research, and people are doing that with NFTs, which is super cool, right? And these are the kind of things that are much harder to raise traditionally. So if you have some kind of a crazy idea right now and you're sitting here, you want to raise money for that, so probably NFTs might be a better solution to you than go to traditional VC. That's what I think.
How do you know which route to go down? You're going to be biased because you work for a VC, but how do you know whether to go the traditional route or to go the NFT route?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like it's a good question. Which I think when you do it, you just know, right? If you're building a DeFi project, it's pretty obvious which route you want to know. You always have some kind of a comparison, and if you're not, you should probably go to NFTs, right? Because that's the route for the unknown things. So it really depends what you want to build. Like I participated in CityDAO, which is a DAO that sold like 10,000 citizenships as NFTs. It was one of the coolest projects ever. I think I really enjoyed being part of it, and I'm not sure that is something that like traditional VC would have financed. Although I've seen some really cool stuff being financed by like traditional VCs, like friend with benefits, all these kind of new DAOs. But still, I think like if you think about CityDAO or Constitution DAO, which they tried buying the Constitution, you had this auction, which the actual Constitution was auctioned, and they tried like raising money and buying it. So these are the kind of things that you need like a separate route, which is not the traditional way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think you touched on DAOs there a little bit. I mean, we're building a DAO, so very, very interested in this area. And I guess there's now a new form of DAOs called venture DAOs that make startup investments. There's a few well-known ones. Meta Cartel have one called just Venture DAO, New Order DAO. And there's also now, you can launch an investment club or an investment DAO very easily on a platform like syndicate.io. And I guess what we're seeing happen now is more of these smaller investment clubs popping up. And again, I think there's one female-focused one that I've seen, but I think we do need a few more female-focused ones, because I'm not going to say which venture DAOs that I've spoken to, but when I've asked them in terms of the ratio of men to women that they funded, not being too great, probably less than 5%. And it's hard because there are less female founders in Web3, in crypto in general.
Yeah.
And what do you think now needs to happen from like your perspective, from a VC's perspective, to be able to increase that number and increase female founders in the space?
Yeah, I think it's education. I think it's what we're what you're doing right now, and you're saying it out loud. And I think that's the first thing we should do. We should state it's a problem and like say, hey, we want to have more female founders in DAOs, in investment DAOs, in Web3 in generally. So I think like that's the first part, like just trying to push it with education. I think that's like I'm like we're actually doing a lot of these programs. We're trying to get women into crypto and generally into tech in Israel. Like there's a lot of efforts trying to push women into technological occupations. And it's hard, it's really hard because you have the whole system not structured this way. A lot of the culture a lot of time. So you have to do a lot around that. But I don't know, what do you think that you can do with NFTs or with these kind of things to improve that?
Good question. I think NFTs in particular offer a really good route for women to get into Web3 because it's more visual, and like if I'm speaking from a statistical perspective, that's kind of what women are more drawn to. And I think the problem that I'm now passionate about solving is trying to get women from NFTs into things like DeFi, infrastructure, and more the deeper layer stuff. Because while there still are not enough women in the NFT ecosystem, there are definitely not enough women in this side of things. And I think projects that get funded, like are more likely to get funding, are the infrastructure projects, especially from a VC's perspective. So I think in terms of trying to get more funding to women, we need to get more women building in Web3, and by building, I mean the deeper root stuff. And I think that will be another key challenge. And I think that's about creating interest and breaking it down, and even full transparency. So we're doing a pilot cohort for this VC analyst training program in London. And so we took on 12 VC analysts. It was really easy finding women for that part of the equation. And then we opened up 8 intern spots. And safe to say that we didn't get enough female applications. We still managed to make it 50-50 in the end, but the ratio was not good.
Yeah.
And I think, again, this comes down to how you framing the job description and all these kinds of different things, because obviously women are statistically less likely to apply for a position they're not qualified for. And then when you combine Web3 and then you combine the word VC, it's almost like a double-edged sword in a way.
And crypto.
Yeah, I know. So we actually really struggled to find women interested in those internship roles, whereas the women that were already in VC, that was, I think, probably one of the easiest things. So I think that highlights how we need more interest. We need to generate more interest, and I think we generate more interest by breaking things down and by making them seem more accessible. Because at the moment it's seen, like when you say DeFi, so many question marks pop up in people's minds. And I really think it's about breaking it down as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Lefty speechless.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying, like, actually NFTs are much more flexible. Like, if you thought about crypto for like 3 or 4 years ago, so it was very financial driven, and I think one of the things that were opening up in the last 2 years, you have a lot more things around culture with NFTs, and I think it relates to the funding gap, right? You can fund a lot more things that are much wider. So, it relates to most of the population, so it can be women and men. It's not just DeFi, because if you thought about like crypto 4 years ago, so everything was, it was pretty hardcore, right? You had Ethereum, you had smart contracts, everything was very techy. And I think for the first time for the last like 2 years, we have a lot of things that can interest a lot of different kinds of people, and are also more accessible to funding, like we're just talking about. So if you're an artist, if you're a photographer, if you're a game developer, all these kind of things that, it was really hard getting the money to do them and find your community. And I think NFTs opened up all these new approaches. And I think it's really exciting. Like, it's not obvious. Maybe it sounds obvious right now, but yeah, it's not. I think it's such an amazing tech because it really lowers the cost of fundraising. And like NFTs, you can just spin off an NFTs on OpenSea. You can sell it. If it's interesting enough, you can open a Discord. You can, and all of a sudden you can have a big amount of money to do the thing you want to do. And that's exciting. That's not trivial.
Does your VC invest in NFTs?
We bought some actually. Like we're more focused on like general early stage technology, but we do own some NFTs. We like to play around with these kind of things, and yeah, like we're involved in a lot of like we always try to do like the stuff that the cool kids love. So so for sure, and I think like we haven't invested in a DAO selling NFTs ever, but I think we're very open to do that. I think it's a new cool kind of an option to raise money to internet communities, and I'm sure we're going to do it sometime. What about you? Do you own any NFTs, or did you do it through the VC, or right now with your DAO?
I own NFTs, but my VC would never invest in NFTs. I work for more of a traditional Web2 VC. Tokens are way out, off the tables, as I think most Web2 native VCs are like that.
Yeah.
So now we're looking to structure a fundraise ourselves, and I think the point is you have to be flexible as a startup as well in terms of equity in the company and whether it's token equity as well. And I think it's really about being flexible, adapting to the market, and just figuring it out. But what I guess, to close off, where do you think NFTs are heading in the future? I mean, we're obviously going through a bit of a rough time.
I think we're going to see a lot of permutations. Like, we're only getting a taste right now for what we can do with digital objects. And I think, basically because these things are programmable and, programs are an infinite design, you can do whatever you want with them. So you have a design space that is so wide that I think we're going to see a lot of new things that we can't imagine right now. It sort of feels, even like walking in here and like talking to people, you get this vibe of like the early days of the internet, right? People are really excited, people are really passionate, and I think, when you take that and imagination and technology together, so like, I don't know where we will go. I think it's going to be a very weird ride, and we're going to see a lot of new things that we can't think about today, but yeah, but you're going to have all the basic properties of composability and interoperability and all of these cool things that we can do with public blockchains. What do you think? Just to close it off.
Yeah, I'm going to say it, we've probably heard it a million times today, but utility and real use cases for NFTs. I think we've seen PFPs come in, and I think we've seen them be used as community passes, which I think is great. But I think moving forward, we'll go more to utility. Cool. And another thing that I'm particularly excited about is soulbound tokens and looking into that more.
Oh, yeah.
But that's a whole nother topic. Is there anything that you want to say to close off? How can people find you?
I'm on Twitter if you want. I write about venture capital, about crypto markets, about tokens. So you can find me on Twitter. You can send me a message. You can DM me, whatever you want. If you're building something and you're looking for advice, my DM is open.
Yeah, likewise for me. You can reach me on LinkedIn or Twitter. If you're looking to get into Web3 VC, we have a waiting list for the next cohort, and we're looking to structure this analyst DAO, so feel free to reach out to me as well. But yeah, hope you have a lovely evening.
Yeah, thank you.